Hey everyone, this is Dr. Drizzle, and welcome to our first podcast of When the Real World Meets the Right Now. Brand new talk about what's happening in schools and what's working and what resources we have out there. I am thrilled that my first guest is my dear friend Kim Miller from Star, Idaho. Kim and I met a few years ago and have become very fast friends, and we are so glad that she is my first inaugural
Yay!
guest. Yay! So, Kim, tell me a little bit about who you are. What do you do with your free time? Just a little bit about yourself so our audience will know who we are talking to tonight.
Okay, my name is Kim Miller, and I am a second grade teacher at Barbara Morgan STEM Academy in Meridian, Idaho. I live in Star, Idaho, so we have a lot of smaller towns right here close to Boise. So I'm 15 minutes from my school. Our school is really an interesting situation. It started as a low-income, high-poverty school, and they wanted to mix it all up, and so they changed the curriculum to a STEM focus, brought in a new principal and a bunch of teachers that wanted to get on board with the STEM. And so we started doing the STEM integrated approach and became a STEM school 5 years ago. So we're just in our fifth year. It's been a great journey, and I've learned a ton. So I was previously at a small elementary, like a traditional elementary, for 21 years before I made the leap into the STEM school. So it was a big change, and I love it. Love it. So I live kind of down in the valley areas in Idaho. We have tons of mountains around us, so I like to spend a lot of time in the mountains. We have a cabin up in there, and so we go every single weekend. And we're all about four-wheeling and camping and just running away from people and running to nature a lot. And both of us, my husband is a web developer, and we're super techie people. So even though we have a cabin in the mountains, we can't live without internet. So we have internet even at the cabin, which is a big deal to us. So we kind of like to blend those two worlds.
I like that, and I love that you said you were connected to nature. If I'm not mistaken, you were connected to nature very much so with maybe your car. So can you tell us the story about the creature who decided to find warmth in your hood?
Oh no, the marmot story. Yes, there's a lot of construction going on in our area. Everybody wants to move to Idaho, especially people from California. It's a pretty similar climate to many areas in California, but the cost of living here is a lot less. So we get a lot of people that are moving here. So as a result, there's lots and lots of construction going on. Well, traditionally, this whole area is we're considered like a high mountain desert. So we have a lot of sagebrush, we have a lot of foothills and things like that that are surrounding the valleys. So as they're building and encroaching upon natural habitats, these animals, of course, are seeking other places to live and find warmth and homes. And my husband was over by the community college and had his car parked there, his truck. And somewhere along the line, the marmot decided to make his home in our truck. And we came home, and this was like the next morning when he was backing out, we kept seeing little pieces of insulation from the hood of the truck laying down on the concrete. We couldn't figure out what it was. So as he pops the hood up to see why do we have pieces of insulation on the ground, there's this big ugly face staring back at him, which then we took it over. We couldn't get it out. We poked at it. It was like getting down inside of there. So we took it over to our mechanic, and they tried to get it out. They had the truck up on blocks, but it kept running behind one of the firewalls behind the engine and hiding. And then it figured out it could run down the length of the drivetrain and hide up in the wheel wells and by the brakes and stuff. So they couldn't see it anymore. We thought it was gone. We drive to the mountains, which is 2 hours away. The next morning, we still see insulation there. I'm like, what on earth? So we're looking again. My brother tries to get it out. We think it's out. We drive all the way home. We still cannot get that thing out. It is traveled now a couple hundred miles and everything. So finally, our dear friend, the Diffenbaugh, come over and we hose that thing with the garden hose. And it was a really chilly, night and morning. It must have gotten wet enough and cold enough that it finally crawled out of there and left because we never saw it. However, in the meantime, we also shorted out some things. We had to have spark plugs replaced. Spark plug wires cost us I think we paid about $1,000 in damage to our truck. So yeah, we're not a big fan of marmots at all. We wish they would go live somewhere else. And now people send me random badger pictures and marmot pictures, and I'm like, that is really not funny anymore. I don't like them. So,
It's not funny, but that just shows me how connected to the world of learning you are, because I'm sure that was a STEM story that you went back and shared with your students. I've actually gotten to visit your school before and to walk into your classroom and realize that when I walk in there, I'm in a totally different world. I'm not in just a classroom. I'm in a learning environment that inspires me to learn. We know that you teach in a STEM school, and we know that it's named after Barbara Morgan, an astronaut. So tell us a little bit about your story, your STEM learning story, your personal one connected to your school one. Just what does it mean to you? What is it about STEM that just fires you up?
Well, when I was at the traditional school, this was, but I always say it was STEM before STEM was cool, and we were looking at our curriculum and going, this has never made sense. Why do we compartmentalize our days, saying, okay, here we're teaching reading, and we might be reading about somebody's hats, or we might be reading about Bob did this. And then we would stop doing that, and then you do math for this block. And in math, we might be doing multiplication or something, but it had nothing to do with what we were learning in the other areas. And then you would stop that, and you would do just social studies or just science. And like that never made sense to me. And everything was so disjointed for the kids that it was always more powerful when we could connect it all. So we started taking our science and social studies themes and then running all of our stories. We rearranged the order of them from the basal units, or we filled in with different stories. And we would kind of go a science theme, a social studies theme. And we were noticing how much more engaged the kids were, and then how much more fun it was to teach. Like, oh, okay, I can teach, if I have to teach multiplication, I can run it through a lens of, Revolutionary War, or whatever it was that we were studying. We would try to find those connections to keep things in context for kids. And we started seeing how powerful that was for learning, and even passionate for us because it made it tons more fun when things were in context. And just a lot deeper learning. The writing got better because they were now writing about things that they were more engaged with and had context instead of writing about random subjects. So I got really excited doing that probably the last 8 years or so that I was at the traditional school. And then the deeper I dug into the science side of it, I've always been super techie, so that part was easy. I love the science. And so when I heard about this school, that they were going to open it up, I'm like, I'm going to check this out. So I kind of did I'm going to pretend I'm a parent and go to these informational meetings and see what the inside scoop is. And so I went to one of the informational meetings under the guise of being a parent. And that's how I met the principal, and I heard about his vision and the curriculum, and they had just hired the STEM teacher that day. And so we introduced her, and I'm like, what? This is awesome. This, I understand. This is exciting to me. And so then I, of course, went right back, and I'm like, put my name on a transfer list, and I'm like, interview me, please, please, please. And kind of went down that road, got an interview. And I remember in my interview with him saying, I feel really confident in my science skills and the ability to teach elementary science. I can handle that content-wise. And I feel really confident with my tech skills. I know I have a lot to offer to help this school, with the technology stuff. And my math, I feel really good about the math. I've taught lots of levels of math. I feel like I have a good grip on that. And I'm like, with the engineering piece, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And he goes, you're totally going to get this. And so I was really open about that being a big weakness for me. which is a big strength of the friend of mine who teaches the STEM class. And they're like, we can coach you through this part. You're going to love it. So as we got into the school, and he developed something what we call the WISE way, and our whole school does it. So it's kind of like our version of a scientific inquiry type process. We wonder about things, we investigate them, we share, and then we extend, however that extension might look. And so we were talking through this WISE way. And then how does the engineering design process fit into all of that? And the deeper that first year I got into it, I'm like, this engineering piece is like the bomb, So we kind of started to learn about how all those things really, it's not the end result. This probably came at the end of our first year, that it's not about the science or the math, that really STEM is about developing a set of critical thinking skills. It's really about following a process of wondering and investigating, and that goes with all the areas. So I think sometimes people get really hung up that STEM, it's like it has to be the science, the technology, but it's not about those things. It's about really in-depth thinking and processing skills. So our school, after going through that, then we have really shifted toward project-based learning, because that helps the kids develop these STEM skills that we are trying to help them develop. So we've really got to project-based learning now because of that shift in focus away from content into process.
So it really looks like you as teachers were huge learners in this whole process also, that you were learning right beside your kids. Now, I love the WISE acronym. I actually saw that up in the school when I was there. But something else I saw that was very interesting were your concept maps, where you planned with the other teachers to build from the inside out your vision. Can you tell us a little bit about those concept maps that sort of is how you plan your project-based learning now?
Yeah. So we went through, we started that first year just kind of like stepping in every pothole we could find. And we're like, okay, well, we want it to be this, but that didn't work out. And, so it was a lot of experimentation. And then we learned, definitely about more integration, about the process skills. How do we get this to kids? Well, we were simultaneously doing a book study on the high impact instruction with Jim Knight, and he is really big on learning maps. So we were saying, well, how can we bring some form to our just randomness? Because we want to have a direction with it, and we want to make sure that we're still covering concepts, but we want it to be inquiry based, and we want it to be in context and integrated. So what that led to was like, well, how can we create a system to plan this over and over and not just be so random? So we started working towards like, all right, well, we know we have to start with our standards. Let's start with our science standards. And if you go from there, then really, if we want to keep it in context, your next big question should be, well, where do you see this in the real world? So we started to develop a system and a process to plan those PBLs. And after you go through all the brainstorming in the real world and careers and political, social events, the next step then is to like plan, how does this fit in with other content areas? So that's where the learning map comes in. We put our big essential question in the middle, and then we say, what are the skills now that the kids are going to need in order to answer that essential question? What science skills will they need? What math skills are they going to need? What ELA skills do they need? And then we start mapping all the skills for the different content areas so that we can plan it in an integrated fashion that is purposeful and not so random integration. And then we know then we have this big map on our wall, and we've even gone a step further from, I think, when you saw it, and we color coordinate the content areas so the kids can see, here are your science concepts, here's your math concepts, and then we pull pieces of them out, and we're saying, look, here's the piece that we're working on, and here's where it fits in the big picture. So the kids have copies of those learning maps, that they keep in their STEM notebooks. Plus we have big ones that are on our walls. Some people have a giant, like they take up half the wall in their room. My grade level, we have them, they're about, 3 foot by 3 foot, and they're magnetic so that we can take them down and move them around and show the kids how things are connected. But yeah, we use like verbs to describe and the action, and how they're connected from one thing to another. We have all the concepts and all the pieces listed on the board so the kids can see where we're going and how things are related.
So obviously a lot of planning goes into that. I know we always talk about we should work smarter and not harder. So that planning goes into effect. You work together, you collaborate, and then the kids benefit. I know that you and I are in a texting group. We text every day for the last 6 years, I believe. And I love when we all have those moments of STEM that just jump out of us in the classroom, and you share many of those. I want you to share your favorite, but I also want you to tell us about the holes in the baseball field. Do you remember that one?
That's the most recent one. The kids are out there digging holes in the baseball field, and I'm like, so what are we doing out here, guys? And we have a school garden, a beautiful school garden, and we all go out there and do cool experiments and inquiry stuff and whatever observations. But here they are at recess digging holes in the baseball field, and they were finding seeds around the playground off of trees and weeds and goat heads and random stuff like that. And they're digging holes in the baseball field to plant their own garden. And I was like, well, how about instead of in the middle of the baseball field, how about we move it over by a fence line where it won't get stepped on and won't get ruined? Okay, so we're going to move it over by a fence line. They're super excited. I'm like, I'll even get you a little tub with shovels. You can dig to your heart's content over here. And so as we go to move the garden over to the fence line, I even had some old flower seeds. I'm giving them seeds. I'm like, hey guys, why don't you put some sort of a border around it so people will know that it won't get stepped on or something? And I go, what do you think you could use? And they're like, oh, we know, we could use rocks like we did at the worm cemetery. I'm like, wait, what? What worm cemetery? So then we find out. I'm like, show me what you're saying. Well, the kids had been like, they're kids, and they loved, like, what is this? And they're playing with worms on these rainy days, worms that they dug up and find. But if the worms don't make it, they had an entire section out there by one of the fences that they buried the little worms. They had little crosses, and they'd taken rocks and outlined all their little graves for the worms. And an entire worm cemetery going on. I'm like, okay, so yeah, like the worm cemetery then. Get some rocks, and so they lined their little garden. They are faithfully watching it. I'm pretty sure they're digging it up more than they're like letting it grow. But that's the beauty of it, they're just learning trial and error that probably shouldn't use the shovel and dig up your garden to check on your seeds every day.
Exactly.
Yeah, they got their own little makeshift thing going on out there.
So obviously you have many stories. Do you have one that connects your class to the community? Can you think of one?
Yeah, probably the most powerful one that's happened. This is a big one. We just finished a PBL on redesigning a piece of sport equipment for the Winter Olympics. And our original, in our minds, our teacher minds, we were thinking, okay, let's have the kids redesign a piece of like normal equipment, or maybe something you would use that is difficult for someone who's visually impaired, or somebody who might be paralyzed or missing a lower limb or something, that in the wintertime is difficult for them. Like maybe it's difficult for them to get their wheelchairs through snow or things like this. So originally we were kind of headed in that direction. And then we were like, well, wait, it's the Winter Olympics. So maybe instead of redesigning just anything random, they can redesign a piece of sport equipment to help a winter Paralympian compete more easily. And then as we had some guest speakers come in, we had a couple of Paralympic athletes come in and be guest speakers. One Skyped in and two came in and visited. It quickly turned. And what made it turn was something one of our guest speakers said about she had always wanted to, she'd wanted to shoot archery, and she is missing her arm I guess it's just above the elbow, I think it is, just below the elbow. And when she wanted to go shoot archery with her brother and went to the sporting goods store, the guy said, well, you can't. There's just nothing out there. You won't be able to do it. And she was like, well, why is that? That can't be. There's got to be a way. And so she started doing some research and finding out about some other amputees who were doing archery and then modifying their own equipment. And she kind of told us about that journey. And that struck a chord with our kids. Like, that was sad and that was not right. That she really wanted to do something and was limited because we just didn't make it for her when we could make something for her, that they thought that was a big injustice. And then our second Paralympian that we were Skyping with, he talked about how much that he loved, his sport was wrestling. And he has limbs that didn't fully develop, so he has some smaller limbs. And they said, we're sorry, but, wrestling is not a sport that you can do in the summer or winter Paralympics. And so he had to switch over to wheelchair rugby because they didn't have the sport that he loved the most. And my kids thought that was a terrible thing, that he should be allowed to do what he loves. So then we thought, well, maybe this needs to switch. Maybe instead of modifying just any piece of equipment, maybe the persuasive, because we were writing persuasive letters, that you are writing to persuade the Paralympic Committee to add a new sport to the Winter or Summer Paralympics. And your job then is to design the equipment so that they could. And then it was like everybody fully invested. Kids, adults, the parents, we got tons of emails. And the people that our Paralympic athletes that we were working with, we invited them back at the end after the design was done. And we had a big showcase, had the parents come, kids were presenting what their ideas were, and then we're sending all the letters and information off to the Paralympic Committee because they're persuasive letters about why they should add these new sports. And then they had models that they had engineered so that they could actually see what they were, had designed and were trying to persuade them to do. Well, that Paralympian that we had, the archery gal, brought with her a young gal who she's like 13, I think she was, and she does track and field, and she has some limbs that didn't fully develop, so kind of like the other athlete we met. And she said that she goes, well, I know this guy who competes, he's visually impaired, and he competes in the long jump, and he can hear where to go and how many strides to take and when to jump by his coach whistling at him or clapping at him. And she goes, but it's always trouble for him. He doesn't do well on big stages because the noise is so intense that they can't ever quiet the crowd enough for him to be able to hear his coach well. And he ends up going way off course.
And we're back. Wow, Kim, I had to stop for a moment and just go grab some tissue there because I know you personally, so I know that you are very invested in changing the lives of students, but more importantly, helping them change the lives of others. And it looks like they're already doing that, at second grade. And I can't even imagine what's happening. A lot of us as teachers, we want to do these same things. We hear the stories, we see things on social media, but we're a little bit scared to reach out and find those resources ourselves. So any last words to give us a little encouragement to get out there and make those connections?
Yeah, I would say my best advice is it's a big bite to take off, and I think that's probably the biggest mistake people make in the beginning. They try to go all the way right away. And it takes time. Start with little things. You don't have to start with these big giant projects. Just start with little things, like do some inquiry learning and maybe tie a story to it. So just don't try to do it all at once. That would be some good advice, I'd say. But definitely find some mentors. Find some people that have been there, done that, walk through it. And I know that that's been a struggle for our school. Like, where can we find a school that is doing what we're doing? We can find individuals, but tough to try and find a whole school, and that's been hard for us. I think it is so much easier as individual teachers if you can go find somebody who's doing it. So reach out to them. It might be on Twitter. It might be on Facebook. I know that through the Den, we have lots of STEM stuff going on. There's a lot of people use the Science Tech Book. There's a lot of people that are now doing the STEM Connects. So connect people within Discovery Ed, connect with people Twitter, connect on Facebook, and just start asking a lot of questions, because they can help guide you through some of those potholes. Like I said, we stepped in a lot in the beginning, and just start small. Start small and find people to help you.
Excellent. And Kim, if they wanted to reach out for you, how could they find you on Twitter?
On Twitter, I'm under K Miller, Idaho. You can find me the same place. Pretty much that's like my Skype, my Instagram, my Twitter, all of that. Or you can reach out to me through Discovery Ed too.
Thanks. Again, thank you. I thought about this for a long time, about doing this podcast and how would we start, and I put it out there, and 20 plus people have already signed on, but I knew that you would be my first guest because I see you live this. This isn't just something that you say. It is the walk and the talk that's very evident in your in what you do in the classroom, evident in how you share with other educators, and just your heart, the big compassion. Now, I need a lot of that STEM to continue as I join you in Idaho in a few months. I'm hoping to go whitewater rafting this time and head up to your cabins for some wildlife spotting. Not so much for the little marmot, whatever was there. Not going to ask for that. So anything else you have to throw at us, let us know. So again, thank you everyone listening. This is episode 1 of When the Real World Meets the Right Now. We are excited that you've joined us tonight. We're very thankful to Kim and her story. She has many more. So again, please feel free to reach out to her on Twitter. And Kim, thank you so much and have a great night.
Thanks. Bye.
Join us next week with another episode of When the Real World Meets the Right Now.